Recording in progress. Off we go. Well, welcome to Obstacle Fast and Slow, to the presentation part of Obstacles Fast and Slow. And we will finish with a Q&A session and Ask Me Anything, Ask Mike Anything session at the end. What we're looking at here is a re-recording, a representation, if you like, of an exercise that's been part of our core repertoire for a number of years. Used to be called Good Obstacle, Bad Obstacle. It's been refined repeatedly. It's recently been renamed. It's now Obstacles Fast and Slow. So what I'm going to do is position it first of all, show where it happens in our process, show some of the pitfalls of that process and how the exercise is designed to make the process self-correcting, which is a really important and useful thing. So I'll start, as I always start all our webinars, with this slide and these words: every scope and scale, developing strategy together, pursuing strategy together, outcomes before solutions. That's the really differentiating thing about agenda shift and leading with outcomes. Working backwards, that's right to left, from key moments of impact and learning. And what we're focused on today is the left-hand side of this picture, developing strategy together. And in particular, the middle part of that, ideal obstacles, outcomes. This is the I-do pattern, as we call it. Now, from the title of this thing, you expect we are focused on obstacles, but really we're focused on how we are going to frame our obstacles so that we can have a good outcomes conversation. So we're going to work backwards from that. Now, before we get to the specifics of it, let's put that all into context. Let's look at the I-do process as a whole, the I-do pattern. So it's a great pattern for organizing a series of exercises, for structuring a workshop. You can think of it also as a leadership routine as well, a little checklist to keep in your head when you're having a conversation about anything, where there's uncertainty, there's ideas, there's obstacles, things we want to achieve that ultimately is going to lead into conversations about solution ideas. So let's start with the ideal. Now, here's one example ideal exercise. Imagine reaching the right customers, meeting their strategic needs, that's their needs, our strategy, achieving results in the way to which we aspire. Now, that's not the ideal. Those are some words to reflect on, to have a conversation on, and to help with that conversation, some questions. When that's working at its ideal best for us, what's that like? Whose needs would we be meeting? What new stories can we tell? And the thing that's constructed in that conversation, that's enjoyed in that conversation, is the ideal from which we'll go to obstacles and outcomes, ultimately organizing a strategy, generating solutions, and so on. Now, the thing on the left, that is easily changed. That's one of the things that I, as the provider of workshop designs, can do, that the host or facilitator of a workshop can change, and so on. We might, for example, follow that one with a question. When we're reaching the right customers, meeting their strategic needs, what kind of organization are we? With what products and services are we going to meet the needs of those customers? On what platform of technology, process, and know-how are we going to meet those needs? And those are delivered and supported by whom? So we've gone customer, organization, product, platform, teams. That's the order of our outside-in strategy review. So a particular kind of workshop. A lot of our workshops, they start with some kind of assessment. And here we are reflecting on assessment prompts that have been prioritized in the different breakout groups. And again, we can take one of these prompts or the set of prompts as a whole and ask exactly these same questions. When that's working and it's ideal best for us, what's that like? Whose needs would we be meeting? What new stories could they tell? Or we could write some prompts of our own. Now, this started life as like a retrospective exercise for the end of a workshop. That's what's called full circle. It's taking us back to the beginning, back to the assessment. You're writing your own assessment prompts, and we've got our style guide here: inclusive, simple present tense, non-prescriptive. Now, in some of them, our more recent workshops, this has turned out to be a useful and important exercise in its own right, writing your own prompts. And if you think, well, that's all very wordy, let's just focus on something a bit more abstract. A picture, for example, a generative image, to use the jargon, and we might borrow one from somewhere else. Here is Alistair Cockburn's Heart of Agile. Collaborate, deliver, reflect, improve. Collaborate to deliver. Improve on how we deliver. Reflect on how we do that. Collaborate in our reflection. All of these things on their own and in combination, reflecting on those. When all of that is working at its ideal best for us, what's that like? Whose needs would we be meeting? What new stories could they tell? Now, put this first one back up as perhaps the most representative of them. This is the one we use in the middle part of the foundation module, the foundation training module, reaching the right customers, meeting their strategic needs, achieving results in the way to which we aspire. Now, remembering that the ideal is the thing we're imagining, the thing we're talking about in our breakout group, we then move to obstacles. What stops that? What gets in the way? Deliberately punchy questions here. In fact, we run those questions together. It's like one question. What stops that? What gets in the way? And we'll come up with some obstacles and then outcomes. What would you like to have happen? Then what happens? Then what happens? Then what happens? Starting small, meaningful outcomes all the way down. Signs of emergence, signs, the smallest, tiniest signs that something interesting might be beginning to emerge. It's as tiny as it gets. Then more meaningful indicators of progress, measures of success, signs that we are beginning to win, signs that we are winning, signs that we've won. And beyond those two, goals and aspirations. What do we really want to have happen? And that is a simplified version, sort of foundation level version, if you like, of perhaps our most famous exercise, 15-minute photo, from obstacles to outcomes, as many as you can generate in just 15 minutes. And it's amazing how many you can generate in 15 minutes using only the clean language questions from the card, and for the X's on the card, the placeholders, words previously generated, words from the obstacles, from the answers to what stops that, what gets in the way, words generated in the answers to those questions, words for the most part from outcomes. This generates a ton of outcomes. We can organize those perhaps in some sophisticated way, like with an option relationship map. That's from my friends Liz Keogh and Carl Scotland again, who I mentioned in our upcoming events. Organizing by solution ambiguity horizontally, by customer visibility vertically. Now, the important thing about this is that we're using the whole space. We're spreading these outcomes right from top to bottom, left to right, creating space to draw impact relationships between these outcomes. If we start with one small outcome, where is that going to take us, or where do we hope that it's going to take us? We are hypothesizing these impact relationships. If we want some big outcome, working backwards, where might we start? We might use something a lot simpler than that. Plan on a page, for example, simple 3-column format, short-term, medium-term, long-term. On its own, or with the help of those previous exercises, we might do OKRs, and we're challenging Andy Grove here, the originator of OKR back in the 80s. Where do I want to go? How will I pace myself to see that I'm getting there? And conversations with the I do pattern, ideal obstacles, outcomes are a great way to get to OKRs. Your OKRs then are a summary of your strategy, not a set of targets that have been handed down from somewhere. So ideal obstacles, outcomes, a nice straightforward process. In the words of Jeremy Clarkson, what could possibly go wrong? So to look at what could possibly go wrong, let's look at some of the outcomes that I've seen get generated. So here's a representative sample of some problematic obstacles, and we'll see why they're problematic in a bit. So lack of a knowledge management system, lack of a KMS. This goes back to the very first AgendaShift workshop that I ever did. So I like to use this one as an example. Lack of people, lack of money, lack of time, very obvious obstacles. Obstacles I hear frequently, you will hear frequently, even not, you don't need to use the I do pattern to hear people complain of lack of people, lack of money, lack of time. You might have obstacles that point at some particular group of people, management, leadership, those workers, whoever it might be, and some more as of abstract or ambiguous types of obstacles, mindset, culture, leadership, things like that. So why might these be problematical? Well, let's think about how those obstacles might be received by other people. Think about how the obstacle obscures the issue, how the obstacle precludes the conversation that's really needed. So let's look at these one by one. Lack of a knowledge management system. I can tell you how that obstacle was received. Absolutely no one else in the room cared one bit. I am pretty sure that one person came to the workshop determined to raise the issue of knowledge management systems. That was a solution they were selling, and no one, frankly, was interested. And notice how that obstacle, it doesn't actually identify an issue. All it identifies is the absence of a solution. So it precluded the conversation that was needed, if a conversation was needed. I don't know what conversation he needed to have. No one else was interested. Next one, lack of people, lack of money, lack of time. Now, some people say, yes, this is a real problem. We're hurting here. We need people, we need money, we need time. There will be other people, the people that hold the purse strings, for example, that will say, well, I'm sorry, there aren't more people, there isn't more money, there isn't more time. And people caught between the two might be thinking, well, in your dreams, it's just not going to happen. So these obstacles, again, not conducive to the conversation that needs to happen. We're going to have to look at how we might reframe these. Management, leadership, some other group. Now, if you are part of the management, part of the leadership, or you're one of those workers or some other team, the QA team, the release management team, perhaps that the obstacle points at, you're going to feel judged. You are going to feel blamed. And that's going to cause the shutters to go up. That's not going to be received well. And again, it has completely failed to identify what the actual issue is. The issue isn't the person. The issue is the behavior or the impact of that behavior. And the obstacles, as written here, completely fail to identify it. There still isn't a useful conversation, a productive conversation to be had. And the last few, the more abstract ones, mindset, culture, and leadership. And perhaps start in the middle here. These obstacles, again, completely fail to actually identify what the problem is. Very often, these more abstract ones are a great way of avoiding taking responsibility. You will hear politicians say it's a culture problem and doing their best to not remind everybody that it's that government department or whatever it might be is their responsibility. And we'll look at things like mindset and leadership as well in a moment. So what we're going to do, let's look at the obstacles fast and slow exercise, and then we'll replay these obstacles against the exercise and think about how we might reframe these less than helpful obstacles. So the first part of obstacles fast and slow, the fast bit, it's a two-part exercise. It's just those questions again. What stops that? What gets in the way? And just a reminder that gets in the way of what gets in the way of the ideal, the thing that you enjoyed in that breakout conversation, the thing that you constructed together, shared together in that breakout conversation. What stops that? What gets in the way? And quickly capture at least 5 obstacles. Really easy, really quick. And then there's the slow part. That is to refine those obstacles, because there's a very high chance that some of your obstacles are not well framed for a healthy and productive conversation. So on the left, we've got some suspicious smells to look out for, tribal shorthand, jargon, labels, things like that, scarcity language, lack of this, not enough of the other, poor something else, big or ambiguous concepts. We've seen a few examples of those already. And then on the right-hand side, the more important side, eliminate what might be received as blaming or judging, selling solutions or theories, telling the wrong half of the story, avoiding concrete issues. And what I want to stress here, stress two things here actually. It's not so much about the things on the left. Those are things, those are signs that something might be wrong, but we're not being the language police here. What's important is whether these things on the right might be happening. And we put it in the speaker notes, in the notes to the facilitator, to the trainer, the notes are quite strong. Challenge yourselves and each other. Challenge yourselves and each other to eliminate what might be received as blaming, judging, and so on. So it's a two-part exercise. You can do it as a single exercise in two parts, or you can go out and do the first part, come back, explain the second part, do the second part. I much prefer to do it in two separate goes if we possibly can. It gives more emphasis to that second part. It also kind of invites people to make those mistakes in that first part as well. And that makes the whole thing more instructive. It makes the debrief more powerful. And in some of our workshops and some of our trainings, we do this exercise more than once. And we find that people make the same mistakes each time. The workshop, the exercise as designed, fast and slow, that's okay. Capture the obstacles as you first see them, then put the effort into refining them. Challenge yourselves and each other to get them right. So that's the exercise. Let's see how that plays against some of our examples. So the first one, lack of a knowledge management system. Remember, no one else in the room was interested in this one. So there's plenty wrong here. We've got that shorthand, tribal shorthand, you could call it. We've certainly got jargon. So a knowledge management system is a piece of jargon. Knowledge management in itself is a piece of jargon. It's actually a pretty deep piece of jargon. Big brains remain after a number of years, after decades, are devoted to understanding what knowledge management actually means, what's actually going on when knowledge management is happening, how you might improve it, and so on. So, and there's no way that everyone in the room will have the same understanding of what knowledge management means or what a knowledge management system might do for us. We've got that scarcity language, that lack of, that's always a big clue, or often a big clue that something needs to change. We've got those big and ambiguous concepts. What we're doing here, looking on the right, of course, is selling something. We are selling a solution. The clue's in the name of the obstacle, knowledge management system. We could have called it knowledge management solution even, we are selling something. And the issue is that people don't like to be sold to. And they especially don't like to be sold to when, the conversation we're supposed to be having is something else. It's inauthentic to claim that you've identified an obstacle when you're actually selling a solution. People don't respond well to that. It's better not to even try. Or if you do try, then at least to reframe it. So that's what we're going to do here. And we are, of course, avoiding the issues. What are the issues? Well, I don't know what was at the back of his mind when he was trying to sell a knowledge management solution, but we could have something like knowledge is hard to access. Pretty basic. He may have had other things on his mind. That's just one example of how you can very easily reframe an obstacle that is selling here. What is the problem this solution is trying to solve, in effect? Why is that solution important? Why is that important? Quite useful question to ask. Or when you don't have this knowledge system, then what happens? What's happening without this knowledge management system? Simple questions that you can ask. The next one, lack of people, lack of money, lack of time. Now, I'm very sympathetic to this obstacle. It's a very common obstacle, and you can completely understand why people generate this one. The problem is on the right-hand side, yes, it's selling something. It's selling the idea of more people, more money, more time. But actually, the more interesting part is telling the wrong half of the story. And it's the wrong half of the story when you're pointing at the wrong side of an imbalance. And most of the imbalance here is a mismatch between capacity and workload. And those imbalances can be solved or addressed or mitigated at least by means other than providing more people, more money, more time. You can coordinate better. You can limit your work in progress. I mean, overburdening is like the original sin of lean, isn't it? And there are a number of mechanisms in lean, it's in agile, it's in Kanban, and so on, for mitigating, controlling the amount of work in progress, reducing that overburdening, and greatly improving not just the experience of the process, but the performance of the process as well. So make sure you're addressing the more interesting side of an imbalance. And that way you're actually addressing where the pain is. The pain is that overburdening, that time pressure, or whatever it might be. So let's capture those as our obstacles. Capture the concrete issues focused on the right side of the story, and let's not sell solutions and theories. Now, another one that's quite similar to that is quality, or this might come out as lack of quality or poor quality. One that might be received as quite blaming or judging, but it might not be. This actually might be fine on its own as an obstacle. If everybody has the same idea of what quality means, if everybody has the same idea of what the quality problem is in terms of impact or even diagnosis, then this obstacle may be fine. But if there's any debate about it, it might be worth exploring it a bit more, and exploring it as an imbalance again might be helpful. Perhaps the quality problem is that we are not managing expectations correctly. We don't know what quality standards we're supposed to be working to. Our customer perhaps is working to a completely different level of expectation. There's a gap there. Or there's a gap between our own expectations and the capability of our process. Perhaps there's a process issue that we know we need to do something about. So we are naming the issue rather better. And those more abstract ones, mindset, culture, and leadership. We are ticking several of the boxes here, big or ambiguous concepts. And the issue here, and this is really what the word ambiguous is all about, different people will have different understandings of what they mean. Like with knowledge management, books are still written about leadership. Everyone has their own model of what leadership is all about. Somehow it has to encompass many different kinds of roles that people have, many different kinds of personalities that people have, and so on. It's a surprisingly difficult thing to pin down. Culture, similar kinds of problems, and also people can be very attached to the culture that they have. So if you start to attack the organization's culture, or if you describe an obstacle in a way that seems to be attacking the organization's culture, that can be received as blaming or judging. And the same is true of mindset. Who wants to be told that they've got the wrong mindset? That's what might be implied by these obstacles. Now, I'm not going to fix these. For these very abstract ones, sometimes the best solution is to cross it out and start again. What is the real issue here? There's a need. There's so many different issues it could be. You need to have a conversation about, well, what is the issue that we need to be focusing on? And slightly tongue-in-cheek, but people come perilously close to this obstacle in a number of my trainings and workshops, lack of the agile mindset. I mean, this really does tick every box. We've got some tribal shorthand. Mindset is a piece of jargon. Agile is a piece of jargon, and there is an agile tribe. Let's face it. Scarcity language, we've got that lack of. Now, what are we selling here? We're selling a solution or selling a theory? Well, perhaps a bit of both. But what's the solution? It's to roll out agile or something. It's to reprogram people's minds. That's not clear. Big and ambiguous concepts, of course. Do I feel blamed or judged by not having the agile mindset? Well, perhaps I do. Do I feel sold to? Probably I do, possibly I do. Telling the wrong half of the story we've got the lack of here. Well, what do we have too much of? Or what, again, what are the issues that we really need to be getting to? So let's do a better job of our obstacles. Let's frame our obstacles so that they get to the real issues that will turn productively into outcomes, and ultimately outcomes that people are motivated to act on, to find solutions, to try things, and so on. That's the whole point of this process. So that's the exercise. Capture obstacles, the fast part, refine obstacles, the slow part. I'm just going to finish this bit with some takeaways. The first takeaway, framing really matters. Framing matters because people will receive a poorly framed obstacle badly. That's not a great way to start a conversation. If those shutters go up, you're not going to have a good conversation. Sell the pain, not the solution, the theory, or the blame. Now, I put this in italics because that's quoting from our material. Feel free to use that phrase. Sell the pain, not the solution, the theory, or the blame. Second point, make it okay to talk about obstacles. So this is we're talking safety here, really. And it's got to be okay even to talk about bad obstacles. Like I'm saying, I'm not out to being the language police here. We do need to get issues on the table. It's no point, that sort of, some people call it toxic positivity or the tyranny of positivity. If we're not allowed to talk about bad stuff, then stuff is going to stay hidden, stay under the carpet. It's going to bite you sooner or later. If you want to do a good job of anything, you need to know what the obstacles are. If you want to have a good strategy, you need to know what the obstacles are. No one will take seriously a strategy that doesn't seem to, own up to, let alone address the obstacles that we all know are there. So we'll accept even the badly framed obstacles, but we'll practice getting better at framing them. Make it okay to challenge them too. Now, to challenge each other on how we frame our obstacles, again, you've got to have the safety to be able to do that. And it leads to another question as well, another favorite of mine, and again, I'm quoting from material, who's invited? Now, if the way you're going to frame an obstacle might depend on who's in the room, then frame the obstacle as though those that you're worrying about are there. Ideally, they are in the room. You're actually working through these issues together. But if they can't be in the room, still respect those people that are outside. Let's not blame our managers, let's blame our leaders, and let's not blame that lazy workforce and so on. When people chat me sometimes, as they do, with some truly terrifying obstacles, very often they are blaming people. In fact, nearly in every case, they are blaming people who are not in the room. The mistake in the design of the workshop was not to adequately consider who needs to be in the room. Usually, for a really productive workshop, you want at least 3 levels of organization represented. You're more likely to have the people that have the, on the ground, the cold face understanding of what's really happening. You've got people that have an overall view. You've got people with authority. You've got people with budgets and so on. You've got the people in the middle who have to make it all make sense. Who's invited? That leads to whole other conversations about the decision-making capacity of your organization and the communication capacity of your organization. And I can guarantee you don't have enough of either. Pay attention to who's invited. And lastly, if you want to improve your organization's discourse, here might be a good place to start. It's an easy exercise, it's a fun exercise, and it's one where in the debrief, it's very clear that it's been a thought-provoking exercise as well. And it's one of my favorite exercises. It's only how old? 5 years old, maybe. And, it originated in a workshop that didn't work as well as we expected. Now, fortunately, it was a 2-day workshop. And overnight and in the morning of the second day, we debugged it. We worked out what had gone wrong. And that helped us to identify what was wrong with the obstacles that we were struggling to have good conversations about. And good obstacle, bad obstacle, as we then called it, was born. And over the years, it's become what you see today, obstacles fast and slow. So how do we use it? Very quickly, finishing now. So in our workshops, every one of these workshops uses obstacles fast and slow at least once. The adaptive organization workshop uses it twice. The outside-in strategy review typically uses it twice. The others use it once. And all our training, one way or another, addresses it as well. Now, Leading with Outcomes Foundation isn't about named exercises. It's not about workshops. It's about patterns. It's about the concepts. But you do a version of the exercise, getting more to the issues, particularly about how your obstacles are received, than to the tricks involved in identifying and rectifying them. So we save the named exercises for inside-out strategy. So that's where all our most popular exercises, Celebration 5W, Obstacles Fast and Slow, 15-minute photo, and so on, those are introduced in inside-out strategy. There's very much about your repertoire of exercises, but also as a piece of leadership development, it's also about your repertoire of questions, patterns, conversation strategies, and so on. Adaptive organization, that's less about the exercises, that's more about your organization and more about a very interesting model for finding the issues, the dysfunctions, the imbalances in your organization. We'll use that exercise twice in that training, and we use it again in outside-in strategy. That's like the training version of the workshop, expanded with more leadership material, more background, more references, and so on. If you're very interested in facilitating or teaching or some combination, trainer, facilitator, there's usually at least one in the events calendar. Mostly we do this online, 4 half-day sessions, typically Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons, UK time, which seems to work for not the whole world, but for a decent chunk of it. I've done it once in person recently in Bangalore, but usually it's online. And then there's leading in a transforming organization. So I like to do this. This is in person. I like to do this at least a few times a year, at least a couple of times in the UK and a couple of times abroad. At the time I'm speaking today, we're doing it in London and Berlin, or Berlin and then London, June and July 2024, and possibly Southampton in April or September. But there will almost certainly be other instances of this over the course of 2024 and into 2025. This is close to my heart. Book 5, the one I haven't yet started, I'm still finishing book 4, but the one I'm about to write, the deliberately adaptive organization, the model behind this training is the model of the book. And you can kind of upgrade this to train the trainer with one bit of online self-paced training. If you do inside-out strategy, all the training modules you can do on your own, self-paced. If you do inside-out strategy, you can qualify as a facilitator or trainer. Now, everything I've just mentioned, all the links will be on the Obstacles Fast and Slow page, agendashift.com/obstacles fast and slow, as you can see at the bottom of the slide here. There's a shortcut, agendashift.com/OFS. Now, at the time I'm speaking, that page isn't well populated, but as soon as the video gets onto YouTube, the video and various resources and links to events and so on will be on that one page. In terms of resources, PDF of the slides that you've seen, and PowerPoint and PDF of the open source Creative Commons version of the exercise, so formatted as all our other open source exercises are. The template I use for the Academy, I can't just give away. So we have a simpler style for the open source materials. But if you're an Academy subscriber or an Academy supporter, you'll get access to the official Academy version of the exercise as well. So that was Obstacles Fast and Slow. I hope you found that interesting. And we've got some time now for questions and answers. Ask me anything, ask Mike anything. I'll stop sharing my screen, but we can always go back to the slides if we need to. I like to keep these things to about an hour. So I will aim, if possible, to stop at around the top of the hour. I can overrun by a few minutes, but not by too many. But if you've got questions, then now's the time. So let me just stop sharing. You can put your cameras on, put your microphones on if you like. Any feedback, comments, anything you want to ask me, now's your chance. And thank you very much for listening. And I'll just add, so all of you will be notified when that new page is up, which won't be today. It might be tomorrow. If it isn't, then early next week. So who's got a question? Yeah, Mark.
Mike, I have an observation that was just so tight and well organized and really, really helpful.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering if you're going to share the slide deck with us.
Yes, I will. So I'll put the PDF of the slides on that page. So it won't be today, but it'll be tomorrow or probably Monday, excuse me. And I'll notify
Thanks.
all participants, and there'll be different versions of just the 2 or 3 slides of the exercise. So there's like a Creative Commons version, and I have a simpler template that I use for the open source versions of my exercises. And the dark mode slides that you've seen today, those will be available to Academy subscribers and supporters. But yeah, there'll be those materials will be made available. Yeah. Anyone else?
I think I did like 2 or 3 times a photo. It was exactly the challenge I had, right? Because I sort of,
yes,
I knew about sort of like not fast and slow, but the older version, good and bad obstacles. But sort of, it was so difficult if you do it the first time with a group. And I don't know, what is your experience? How many good obstacles, sort of like, how long would you do it? Because you could do it, it's the most important conversations probably that are happening because it's the foundations of everything that you do afterwards.
yes. I mean, it's
So
become
when not to be disappointed at the end
yeah.
of gathering obstacles.
I mean, 15-minute photo is like the highlight of the workshop, but the obstacles fast and slow is pretty central, and I'm pleased to say that it's one that people mention in the retrospective afterwards. And yeah, you give people a few minutes to generate their obstacles, rather more time to refine them, and then there's a debrief, and that could be an opportunity for further refinement. A question I like to ask is, well, which obstacles did you most struggle with? Which obstacles are you least happy with? And we might carry on having a conversation about that. So what started out, a few years ago as a very short exercise has become a much deeper exercise. And always when I debrief, we're always reflecting on the experience before the output. So what was that like? Generating those obstacles, refining those obstacles, and people realize that actually they are making these mistakes in their everyday work life, day in, day out. And this is something they can pay attention to. We're priming people to pay attention to that. As I said in my conclusions, if you want to improve the discourse of your organization, there are a number of different ways that you can do that. I think looking at how you frame your obstacles can be an important one. And again, not to be the language police, but because you're starting to think a bit more carefully about other people, how they will respond to it, where the outcomes and the solutions are going to come from, and so on. I mean, if you got an obstacle and you ask, what would you like to have happen? And the answer is implied by the obstacle, you're not going to have a great game of 15-minute photo. And I think that's what you experienced. So that in a way is the test. But it's not it's not the point. It's to get us thinking a bit more deeply. It's about having an appropriate level of challenge at each stage of the process. The challenge with the ideal is really thinking about other people's needs. Whose needs would we be meeting? What new stories could they tell? Enjoying it all being great, that's easy and fun and nice. But there needs to be some challenge there. The challenge with the obstacles, and it's very explicit, challenge yourselves and each other. So that, you know, that challenge is in it, but it's quite a satisfying kind of challenge, and you know, you end up wrestling with these obstacles, and that's great. If you're if you're a facilitator and you see people wrestling with something, you know that's good. There's something good happening. You know, and the challenge with outcomes is is starting small. You know, starting small, the solutions focused people will tell you that's how you get unstuck. You need to get unstuck before you can get going. You need a place to start. You know, you can't start with world peace, cure for cancer. You know, you've got to you've got to start where you can start. There's a bit of practice there, and effectively in the training we are coaching people to start small, teaching people how to start small. But in the middle of that, getting the obstacles right, really important. And I think if you've had a difficult experience of 15-minute photo, it's either because the obstacles weren't right, or possibly not spending enough time just introducing the exercise, modeling how the flow of the conversation goes, and so on. It does take a little bit of practice, but getting those obstacles right, super important. Yeah. Anyone else?
Can I?
Yes,
Yeah.
please do.
In
I see some
in
books
your
that I
books,
recognize there.
I saw one another exercise,
Yes,
5W, as
yes,
a predecessor because obstacles is difficult topic to talk about,
yes,
and
yes,
then you need to warm up and
yes,
open up and create the environment.
yes,
So how you see relation to this exercise?
yes.
Have
Well, if we
it
go, yeah,
changed,
yeah.
evolved?
So if we go back to the you know, the slide near the beginning, we had ideal obstacles outcomes in the middle. Before that, we had established context, and after it, we had organized the strategy. So either the assessment or the celebration 5W exercise, I mean, either or both of those, they are all about establishing context. And so that's about, you know, context, you know, I describe it as being at the intersection of scope and situation. You've got an organizational scope, you've got stuff happening, how this all comes together, that's the situation you're in, the challenges that you face, and so on. You need to identify those. You can do it directly. You can ask, you know, who are we? What are we dealing with? What are our challenges? And so on. That's what we do in Foundation. Elsewhere, we do Celebration 5W. We do it sort of laterally. What's the who, what, when, where, and why of the celebration we're going to have when we've made our next breakthrough? And that's just a fun and energizing way of getting to those challenges, getting to context. So yeah, that is important. I'm not such a fan of the sort of style of retros where, you know, let's hear your obstacles for this sprint, you know, and without any thought, any context, you know, they just go up on the wall. You know, I'd much rather, you know, find some way of getting us talking in the same area, focusing it, establishing context, you know, whether it's celebration 5W or an assessment or something else that gets us thinking. It could be a timeline exercise, it could be a value stream exercise or something. But yeah, not just sticking obstacles up on the screen. It's too wide, too unfocused. And where we're trying to get to is something like a strategy that we can pursue, follow up on, and so on. When we all know that, you know, half the problem with the retros is that, you know, most of the time teams don't follow up, don't do what they say they're going to do. You know, there's not the commitment there. Yeah. Yeah, so that was Celebration 5W, was the exercise that Vladimir was mentioning. Agendashift.com/resources. You can find that there. Anyone else? We've got a few minutes left. Yes, John.
Mike, that was very, very tight and cogent, and a wonderful thing to have in a facilitator's toolkit. And I'm thinking about the dependency upon the facilitator to make this work.
Right. That's a really good question. And actually, we get to some of the philosophy of, you know, agenda shift and leading with outcomes. I use those terms mostly interchangeably, but, you know, agenda shift is the title of the book. You know, it's kind of the name of the framework. Leading with outcomes, you can think of as just as a better brand, or you can think of it as agenda shift as leadership development. But this important piece of philosophy is that, you know, there's so much focus on the breakouts, and it's not me at the front of the room holding forth, moderating every conversation, being part of every conversation. I've designed exercises that, possibly with the aid of a few resources, a few prompts, each breakout can go and do its thing and have a great conversation. There is undoubtedly some skill in being a facilitator, being a host, being a trainer. Host gets really not nearly nicely to, you know, what we're trying to do. We're trying to create the environment where people can enjoy a productive conversation. Those words are actually in the instructions for 15-minute photo. There's the role of the host in the game. Your job is to help each other enjoy a productive conversation, and that role is rotated. No one stays in any role for too long in that particular game. So we're making these things explicit. We are effectively teaching people how to have these better conversations in their organizations. You know, the workshop is there for what it produces. It's there for the conversations that people have, but we also really hope that some of that experience rubs off on people, you know, that it makes a difference. Not just in terms of what we've agreed to pursue, but it makes a difference in terms of how conversations happen afterwards. And you start to, if you've worked with a team, even not for very long, you start to hear, you know, some of those questions coming back, you know, and being dropped into more everyday conversation, and that's really nice. So I mentioned I'm writing a couple of books. So book 4, you can think of a slightly different perspective on the Agenda Shift book. Jervis Bush and Bob Marshak, they of Dialogic Organization Development fame, asked me to write a short book for their series on dialogic organization development. 100 pages, 30,000 words, and it's taken me like 2 years to write. Writing for a professor turns out to be quite hard work, I'm discovering. And that's delayed book 5, but possibly for the better. You know, I think book 5 is going to be a better book for the delay. But those kind of issues, how do we be hosts? How do we make exercises self-facilitating?
Yeah.
How do we break some habits that the facilitation community has taught us over the years? You know, this push to convergence. You know, the diverge-converge pattern is an important pattern for decision making. It's not necessarily a good pattern for strategizing. So rather than trying to converge on a few key decision points, we just take a change of direction. Ideal obstacles outcomes are changes of direction. And the breakouts themselves decide what's important, what they carry forward into the next conversation. And they're hearing what the other breakout groups have been talking about as well. So we have worked hard. Since writing this book, I've worked harder to recognize when I am converging unnecessarily. So if, for example, with obstacles, it's at least 5 obstacles, not 5 to 10 obstacles as I used to write. And that's a really small thing. That you'll see in the book. That book is, you know, the Agenda Shift book goes through all the exercises. It's quite direct like that. The new book is perhaps a bit more thoughtful about the thought process and the principles behind it, and why, you know, they're important, how it creates a coherent experience, how you might create a coherent experience, not using my favorite tools, my patterns, the I do pattern and the other patterns, but using perhaps some of your own favorite tools, but in a more coherent way, in a more open way, in a less convergent way, and so on. So that book, I'm working on what I hope is the final revision now. So hopefully that'll be published in the next few months, and soon I'll get down to book 5. Yeah, Mark.
Like when you say convergent and prematurely convergent in strategy work, do you mean prematurely solution focused, prematurely process and structure focused?
Yes, and so principle number 1 for Agenda Shift, it has been from almost the beginning, is agreement on outcomes before solutions. We are deliberately deferring solutionizing until later. And part of the, you know, the conversational repertoire, you know, if we hear a solution, well, that's okay. Then what happens? And then you start to get to outcomes again. You know, this becomes, you know, not annoying. It's just it's just a natural part of the process. And you've seen if we have solutions sold in the obstacles, as you've seen, we reframe them. So, you know, solutions aren't a massive problem. The process is, you know, self-healing, shall we say, but we are deliberately deferring solutions. And if you come up with a strategy, to come up with all your solutions up front is ridiculous. You know, you are changing things. The solutions you need today are different from the solutions you're going to need a year from now or 3 months from now. Right solutions at the right time. The strategy is expressed in quite granular terms in terms in outcomes and relationships between outcomes and so on. And you're giving people the opportunity to generate solutions at the right time. Prematurely specifying them is bad for all sorts of reasons. But I'm also talking about, in general, avoiding, you know, don't treat this as a decision-making process. Treat this as an inquiry process, or inquiry, as the North Americans would call it. That's that's a term in organization development. And that book 4 is actually looking at the transition from inquiry conversations into those generative conversations in which people who are already motivated to find solutions are generating those solution ideas, testing them, learning from that process, and all the sort of self-organization that goes around that. So ground I have covered before in the Agenda Shift book. But making it a bit less about the exercises and a bit more about the, you know, some of the, the deeper issues behind it all. Yep. Now, see, we're approaching the top of the hour. We could maybe do one more question, but we should think about wrapping up shortly. Or are we done? I think it looks like we are done. Well, I'm grateful to all of you for joining, for taking such close interest in the presentation, for participating in this Q&A afterwards. And thank you very much. I will notify all of you, as I said, when the video is available and where to find everything and so on. So you'll hear from me very shortly. I'll turn the recording off in a moment. I just want to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
I found the